Happy Monday, everybody. Jason Priester, Clemson Insider. Appreciate everybody that's tuning in tonight. Not going to have some long, drawn out monologue here today. We're going to jump right into it. Going to bring a friend of mine on here in a few minutes to give you a little bit of a different perspective. You get my perspective every week. Going to let somebody else give you their perspective too. Same format as always. Going to take all the questions. Just going to have two people answering them. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors over at A-Glass. 2 locations right here in the PD, one in Florence, one in Sumter. They take care of all your auto glass needs. They do replacement, repair. Stan, Michael, Ryan, those guys been in business forever. There's a reason why they've been in business so long. A-Glass for when you need a glass. Get yourself a free quote today. myaglass.com. You know, I kind of screwed up the title on this thing tonight. Talking season's almost over. You know, it's really not. It's kind of really just getting amped up. I don't even really know what I was thinking when I typed that out. I must have been thinking that the Clemson Media Day is now in the rear view. ACC kickoff starts tomorrow, and it'll be over in a couple of days. But then you still have all of fall camp for all these teams, and it's going to be talking season for another month. So just kind of stack that up to a JP brain fart. Be that as it may, get all your questions in here tonight. We'll take it anywhere you want to go. Gonna bring my baseball pal on here, Ashby, with me. Get her perspective along with mine, and we'll see how it goes.
JP,
What's up, Ashby?
how's it going? How are you?
You got me out of having to do one of my 10-minute monologues where I stumble all over my words. So much appreciated.
Listen, I feel that. I really do. I'm honored to be here. This is so crazy. I'm so used to talking to you on Thursday nights ahead of a baseball series. So this is fun.
We don't, well, once we get to late July, beginning of August, we don't do a whole lot of baseball over here. Maybe we might get one or two. We'll see how that goes. Probably not, but it's all football from here on out. So get your questions in. We'll both answer them. Any recruiting stuff, obviously, I'll take. We're not going to throw Ashby under the bus here with some recruiting stuff.
That's your expertise, JP.
Yeah, I don't know about expertise, but I'll tell you what I think anyways. So get them in, and we'll go ahead and get started here. First one right off the bat. How much did Perry Wright get? Saw the Texas A&M tweet about the NIL. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Can't say that the numbers shocked me all that much. But you got to look at the cutoff date on that thing. It's right before the House settlement took effect. You know, that run. The tweet actually said Texas A&M student athletes received a combined $51.4 million in NIL compensation from July 1st, 2024, June 30th, 2025. So that cuts off right there for when the House settlement kicks in. I can't give you any concrete numbers on what A&M gave Perry Wright. You know, that there's I've seen some floating around there, and if some of the ones I've seen are just even close to truth, they're insane for a high school kid to be getting that much. If you're Clemson, you gotta decide at a certain point how much you're willing to spend on. I don't care if he's the number one prospect in the country coming out of high school, how much you're willing to spend on an unproven player. You know, some of the numbers I've seen are well into the 7 figures. For that kind of money, you can wait until after the season and go get yourself a proven, established veteran out of the portal. Maybe even 2. Excuse me. some of the numbers I've seen. But another thing about that is it's going to be interesting to see how some of this stuff plays out, because I'm not saying this is what Texas A&M's doing, but I guarantee you some schools are promising money that they're not going to be able to pay out, especially, if this college sports commission has its way and these NIL deals are heavily scrutinized, and you have to go through the NIL Go thing and get these NIL deals approved. You're seeing a bunch of the collectives shutting down already. Clemson's in the process of rolling to 110 and the IPTAY, so their collective is going to go away. So it's going to be – I'm curious to see how some of these schools kind of try to live up to some of the promises that they've made some of these kids for 2026 that won't be on campus until next year, because they're not paying. You can't really start paying them until once they sign. So right now they're just promises, and all these 2026 kids are going to kind of fall under the new house settlement. It's going to be fascinating, because I think, like everybody else, I'm just as curious to see how some of these guidelines they're trying to put in on this NIL stuff works out. I don't have high hopes for it. I think they're going to try. I just don't know that they're going to stand up to legal scrutiny.
Yeah, I would also like to point out there that they didn't really have a ton to show for it, which I thought was interesting too. That's the crazy thing about, the Wild West that's been the last few years, is you're not guaranteeing anything when you're paying kids that much money, especially those unproven guys. Like, you still got to come to campus. You still got to be able to produce in games. And I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see how that continues to pan out.
You go back 2 years ago when A&M spent all that money on and put together the highest rated recruiting class. If I'm remembering right, it's the highest rated recruiting class ever. And a year later, half that team's in the portal. They didn't win jack squat. With all this money paid out in the last year. To take that even a little bit further, men's sports received $49.2 million of that money, while women's sports received $2.2. But that's neither here nor there. But for those of you worried about Title IX stuff, these schools aren't worried about that stuff. But yeah, it is kind of interesting that they spend all that money and there's really no results to show for it. I'm not saying they've been terrible, but I don't, off the top of my head, I don't recall any championships, not at least not in the Big Three.
Can't think of any conference, not even the Big Three. Continuing to think, I think a lot of teams had a lot of hype and didn't pan out to a ton, but can't fault a student athlete for that, but it's still very interesting.
No, you go back, you probably saw the story Will wrote about DeAndre McDaniel the other day. Put yourself in these kids' shoes. If some school's offering you 7 figures and these other schools are offering half of that, and you're in a situation where your family could use that money right now, and you don't really have the benefit of being patient and waiting to see how your college career pans out and hoping you make big money in the NFL. There's a ton of these kids, them and their families could use that injection of money right now. And it's, there's going to be a bunch of them that end up at a school that they probably 100% would prefer not to be at, but they just can't afford to turn that kind of money down. All right, Justin asks, how will Tom Allen's 4-2-5 defense hold up against LSU's tempo-driven, multi-set offense and mobile quarterback? I personally like the 4-2-5 against the speedier offenses and the spread offenses and the mobile quarterbacks. It kind of gives you a extra defensive back particularly against this LSU offense, whose receivers are supposed to be. I saw one of their guys at the SEC Media Days the other day say they had 3 wide receivers. I want to say he said they ran faster than 22 miles an hour. I don't know. I can't remember the specific number, but it was impressive. So they've got some burners. So having that extra defensive back will help you on the back end. But I also think it's imperative. I think a big part of Clemson's success is kind of hidden in that first number there, that 4, and how much pressure they can put on that LSU quarterback and keep him contained in the pocket, not leaving the running lanes open, not leaving him lanes to escape. We saw him do that so often last year. So to me, that's going to be that's going to be one of the biggest keys in this game. But yeah, I like the 4-2-5 scheme. I particularly like it against faster offenses. What you think?
I agree. I think, listen, that's a combo I would not want to mess with, especially adding, Will Hilton, everybody. I think it's going to be a nightmare for that offensive line. It's not a super proven offensive line for LSU. And I don't know, yes, the wide receivers are a problem, but they're feeling the exact same way on the other side of the ball, and I mean, everything else that Coach Allen did at Penn State with that defense worked well, and I think he's a proven guy, and watching them practice and everything, I think on top of that, just the intensity is going to be so much greater that I'm really excited to see it. And I don't know. I don't think we can say a ton yet, obviously, but I have a good feeling about him staying contained.
Yeah, I know I'm not going to be in the. I don't know. I might not be in the majority on this. I know some people have questions about Clemson's secondary. I don't.
I don't.
I don't either. I get it, man. They had some struggles on the back end last year. They had struggles all over that defense everywhere last year. And I think, a lot of that started inside the facility and kind of drained over onto the field. I think Clemson's got some dudes at corner. I'm still a big believer in Terrell. If for whatever reason you can get Jaden Lucas healthy, maybe he can finally live up to his potential. I mean, we're talking about a former 5-star in that guy.
And he's had great moments too. Great moments.
He's not been healthy pretty much his entire tenure. And then this Ashton Hampton kid, I think he can be potentially the next first round corner, that Clemson or Mike Reed produces. And don't forget about Corey and Gibson. Got redshirted last year, got to campus hurt. I think he's got an extremely high ceiling. I think Clemson can easily go 5 deep at corner. You got to replace you got to replace R.J. Mickens. And Mickey Khan talked a little bit about that the other day. I mean, I could still hear him say, I don't have any questions. Somebody asked him about, replacing RJ and any questions at safety. I don't have any questions, is what he said.
Which, I mean, is a great thing to hear him say.
I mean, you got guys that have played, You got Khalil Barnes, who's played 2 years. Now, he like everybody else, he was up and down last year.
But honestly, most everybody was, to be so honest.
Exactly.
He had huge moments. He had huge picks. Huge pick. It wasn't at the end of the South Carolina game. Yeah. Big moment. Sorry, everyone.
Don't ask me to remember stuff too far back. I probably won't be able to.
Fair. Sorry to everyone for bringing that up and for bringing up JP's memory. But all that to say, he had really great moments as well. And he didn't have as incredible of a season as he did his freshman year. But now you're a leader. You're a junior, leader of that group. And I feel like it's like that for everybody. This is a veteran defense for the most part. You think about it, and I was going through the positions in my head. I don't know what the big question marks are right now. It's just a matter of do they play as well as they should be able to.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions on the defense side of the ball outside of replacing Mickens and I've said it many times. I think Ricardo Jones can probably slide in. Don't discount Ronan Hannafin. That guy's name got mentioned a bunch of times the other day. That was something that stood out to me. At least Mickey Khan mentioned it a few times. So don't discount him. You got some other young guys in that room that are due to take a step. But to me, Ricardo Jones is probably the prime candidate to see his playing time increase drastically. All right, Aaron says last week I mentioned Georgia Tech could be a possible loss. The more I think about it, the more I think you may be right. They've definitely got us circled, and look what they did to Georgia last season. They that guy's got that program headed in the right direction. You go look at what they did in the last recruiting class. They added some talent. He's kind of continuing that trend here in 2026. I'm just saying, I'm not saying Clemson's going to lose that game. I'm just saying keep an eye on that game. It's in Atlanta. That team's going to be good. Again, if there's a game that I would be worried about Clemson losing right now, it's the Friday night game in Louisville. I think it's extremely difficult for any team to go undefeated. That's why you don't see a bunch of teams doing it every year. But that would probably be the one that I would circle first and foremost. But yeah, that Georgia Tech team with what they got, particularly a quarterback, they got some pieces. I think it's taken them a while to get the right place or the right guy in place there in Brent Key, but I think they finally got the right head coach in place there. And now that we've kind of we're transitioning into this new era where you can pay players legally and stuff, man. They're making a little bit of noise, and he's got them trending in the right direction for sure. What you think?
Yeah, that's going to be a tough one. Hearing you even talk about Louisville brought up some feelings of distress from last year, we'll say. And I agree with you, going on the road up there, coming off of – I was looking at who Clemson has before that. I need to pull up the schedule. But –
before Louisville?
Yeah. I
can't ever remember either.
Georgia Tech soon. That game is coming up
early.
Soon. You got LSU, Troy, and then you're straight into your first away game at Georgia Tech. And I don't know. I could see that being a rude awakening, but we're not going to know a lot until, you watch them play their first couple games. Are they living up to the hype? Is their quarterback, Heisman candidate, like some people are saying? I don't know what to expect with them, but I do know what to expect with going up to Louisville, and it's going to be tricky.
Kind of similar to Georgia Tech having the right guy in Brent Key. I think Louisville's kind of finally got the right guy in Jeff Brown.
Absolutely. I think he might be the second best coach in the ACC.
Offensive guru. I mean, you see what he – I mean, I get it. Most everybody ran on Clemson last year. That wasn't something special they did down there, but he came into that game and they game planned that Clemson defense very well, and Clemson just had no answers for what they were doing, and it wasn't something complicated. They just kept running it right at the weak spot, and bam, bam, bam. But that Louisville game's in late November. It comes the week after Clemson plays Florida State, and it's on a Friday night. Yes, we will both. We're both leaving crack of dawn in the morning.
We'll be there.
Do I think Atkinson or Perry Wright got more NIL. I've not heard any numbers for Atkinson. But I would probably say Perry Wright did, just based on some of the numbers I've seen, because they are insane. And I think Perry Wright's got a extremely, he's got a lot of potential. He can be a really good player at the next level. But I don't think he's an instant impact guy. I think you're paying that much money for a guy, unless you plan to start him out at defensive end. And I think Clemson probably would have done that. I don't know what Texas A&M's plan for him is, but he's 6'2", 6'2.5", 265, 270. Not sure he's physically ready to play on the interior just yet. He does have another year when we'll see kind of how his body develops as he gets to campus. But if you do start him at end, he would be kind of a tweener playing at end. You like your ends to have a lot of length. 6'4", 6'5", and we're talking about a guy that's probably not even 6'3". So I do think there are some questions with him, man. I don't think it's a guarantee he comes in and hits the ground running and makes an immediate impact there in College Station. And the numbers are insane, but I've not really seen any for Tyler Atkinson. I get it. It's Texas, and Atkinson's a 5-star too. But if I had to just take an educated guess, I'd probably say Perry Wright.
JP, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
All right. So with these contracts that are coming out, right? Like you said, for A&M, it was July 1 of 2024 through end of June this year. How do those get paid out going forward? Is there any kind of structure for that to still happen? Or is it just kind of null and void now with the rev share stuff with these young kids that aren't even in college yet?
Most of them are 1-year deals.
So you get paid before you set foot, up to a year before you set foot on campus?
Really, you don't start getting paid till you get to campus, but they're only 1-year deals.
Okay.
I mean, so the kind of the way I read it, all that money would have been paid out by July 1st.
Okay.
I made it a point. I can't remember. I asked somebody this. As a matter of fact, I think it was last week at Clemson Media Days, if they were pretty much all 1-year deals. And, right. He said right now, so far, yeah, that's pretty much the way they do it. But so when you hear of a kid, say you hear of a kid getting, I mean, there have been some examples like the kid at the big time recruit Texas Tech just got. There's some wild numbers. I think they're like $8 million. We've seen $8 million linked to Nico. Obviously that's not per year, but the way these things are structured, they're usually from year to year. So all that money would have been paid out by the end of last month. And a lot of schools tried to front load a lot of their deals. Like if you go to the end of last season, when you start having talks with players on your roster trying to renew their deals for this coming year, a lot of schools front loaded those deals with a lot of the money over the first 6 months so they can get it in before the revenue share cap hit.
Got it. So you have guys that are potentially going to make a lot less money coming up this next year because of the rev share stuff.
Yeah, probably. There'll be some at least. That's there. As a matter of fact, there's somebody already in the comments saying it, but there are going to be lawyers. I can think of one right now that are chomping at the bit, waiting on this NIL go thing to reject one of his clients' NIL deals. He first thing he's going to do is he's going to be at the courtroom the next day filing suit. You can bank on it. But even beyond that, if I'm not mistaken, each conference is kind of policing this stuff. So, I mean, I just don't know how much enforcement you're going to see on some of these things, even if you could legally enforce them, which I don't think you can. I just, with the conference policing themselves, I mean, I'm not nearly as optimistic as let's say Dabo Sweeney is.
Who said the word "I'm optimistic"?
And I have faith.
Yes.
With so much talent at the position, do we expect more 5 wide receiver sets? Oh, I don't know if I don't know that you'll see a ton more 5 wide receiver sets. I mean, you got the guys that you can do that from time to time, but also when you do that, you start taking away from the pass protection too. You're leaving the backfield empty. But I mean, it's possible you see a little bit more than you have in the past, but I doubt you see them run out there, I doubt you see them lean heavily on 5 wide receiver sets. You feel any different about that?
Here's the thing. Just listen to them talk about the wide receivers, Coach Grisham, Coach Riley. I think they're going to do anything they can to get as many guys out there as possible, which makes me think maybe. But I think more than anything, it's going to be guys getting a rep here or there that maybe you wouldn't see getting a rep in years past, just because I think that room is so loaded. And they said over and over again, we have 6 guys that are a starter anywhere else. And so I don't know. I don't know how that pans out, but I think they will find ways to work a Tristan Smith, a Cole Turner in.
Oh, yeah. I think you're going to see a lot of rotating, and I can definitely see them coming out in some 4 wide receiver sets, Adam Randall as the lone back.
Oh, yeah.
And him motioning out wide, and that gives you 5 wide receivers. I can see some stuff like that, but I don't know that I expect the offense to really change dramatically or anything, because you got a couple more dudes at receiver outside schematically anyways. I do think you'll see a lot more rotating, because you got to find a way to at least try to keep those guys happy. And there's only one football, and there's 5, 6 of those guys.
I think I'm really excited to see, a fully healthy Cole Turner. I'm really probably the number one player I'm most excited to watch play is Tristan Smith, because I feel like he's been hyped up since he got there. Nobody was expecting him to make as good of an impression as he has. He's 6'5". You're telling me that guy doesn't get to see the field a lot? Like, I don't know. I don't know how you work all those guys in, but.
And he's a guy that's 6'5" and looks a little taller than 6'5"
Yeah.
once you get up next to him. I mean, that dude is long.
He is a forward.
Yeah, that's why I think you're going to see a lot of rotating in and out. I don't envy Tyler Grisham when it comes.
I do. Are you kidding?
When it comes to deciding how to divide up snaps, but like I like to say, it's a good problem to have. You much rather have the depth than not have it. Especially with the way, the wide receiver positions kind of lacked in recent years at Clemson. They just missed on some guys. Injuries have ravaged that room some years. I mean, it's good to see the fortune kind of turning back the other way.
Yeah, I forgot about, Tyler Brown as well, talking about injuries. Like, we forget he was the wide receiver 2 seasons ago when Antonio was hurt. Like, that was your guy, and making one-handed catches and freshman All-American and all this stuff. They're going to be nasty. They really are.
I don't forget. I've been saying this whole time, he is the forgotten man in that room.
The y'all was not directed at you, JP. Don't you worry.
But no, you're kind of right. He is. he's kind of become the forgotten man.
And I hope if I'm him, I got a chip on my shoulder because of that.
With the emergence of those two freshmen, Antonio being healthy last year, then you bring in Tristan Smith. Yeah, and people kind of, I hate to use the term forgotten, but that's the way I say it too. The better term is probably overlooked, but I mean that's just one more weapon that K Klubnik has got at his disposal, and it gives you two of the better slot receivers in the country, in my opinion.
So at 7:00, August 30th, who are you running out there with as your starters, a wide receiver?
If it's me, I'm probably rolling 4 out there.
Okay.
And I'm running DJ Moore, Wesco, Antonio, and Tristan Smith.
Tristan Smith.
Yeah, if it's me, I'm running those 4 out there first.
All right, coach.
But what they'll probably do is run 3 out there, and it'll be Wesco, Moore, and Antonio. That's probably what they'll do. But the more I think about it, the more I can see them going with a little bit more to 4 and 5 wide receiver sets. You don't have a Brenning stool there. You don't have that dynamic tight end or a tight end that's supposed to be dynamic. Let's put it that way. So maybe this is something they try a little bit more of. But again, it's a good problem to have. Why didn't Dabo go to transfer portal for a punter? He's been pretty clear about that. Matter of fact, what he said last week, if it doesn't work out with who we've got, blame me.
That's what I was about to say. He was like, you can talk to him about it. He said it straight up.
Yep.
He said, we feel good about it. We feel great. If we're not,
yep,
my bad.
So he's got faith in the guys they've got there. Jack Smith, Will McCune. I mean, I get Robert Gunn, who's moved a punter, or he did some punting in the spring. I get it, man. I got as many questions about punters as anybody else. They look terrible in the spring game. Small sample size, but they were bad. There wasn't a punt that went more than 40 yards.
Do you remember when they were kicking it to CJ? Weren't they kicking it to a little kid too to catch it, and nobody could hit the little kid?
Nobody could get it to him.
Me and JP are sitting in the box like, oh, man.
And then, it wasn't any different at the practices that we went to. They're kicking them off the side of their foot. I mean, make no mistake, Jack Smith's got the leg. I mean, it's just a matter of where it's going. If he can find some consistency, he can be a weapon. He was one of the best punters in his recruiting class. The guy's 6'5", 240 pounds. He's a big old behemoth of a dude. He's just gotta be consistent. The only thing I can tell you there is that Dabo believes that he's going to get it done. They didn't feel the need to go get one. He saw enough in the spring to convince him that they did not need to go get a punter. And again, let me be clear. We're not at every practice. We see very little. We get to attend 3 practices in the spring, I think it is. And we get to watch 6-7 periods. And that's like 30, 45 minutes most of the time. And half of that stretching and individual drills. Very little of it is special teams. So, I mean, it's not like we're out there getting really good looks at these guys. And there were only 3 punts the entire spring game. So it's very small sample size. But, I think
if you're
the questions are valid.
If you're a Clemson fan, you're hoping you're not punting much anyway. So
that's a very good point. With what you got returning on offense, you hope you can be more efficient than you were a year ago, and you don't have to punt the ball as much. But if it doesn't work out, I I'll tell you who to email because Dabo said, blame him. I will tell you who to email if it don't work out after the season's over. Who will be the top 4 defensive tackles? Obviously the first two's easy. Capehart, Woods. I'd probably. Oh man, that's a hard one because I think Clemson goes more than 4 deep there. I'd probably have to put Stephylon Green, and hopefully Vic Burley stays healthy, and we finally start seeing the guy everybody expected him to be when he got to campus a couple of years ago.
What is he, a redshirt sophomore at this point?
Yeah. This is 3rd year. You think any different?
No, you just need him healthy.
Yeah, that would be my top 4.
Any question I have about depth or top anybody is going to come down to who's healthy, who's ready to go. And you clearly need those guys to make a jump. But I don't know. I think that they both have potential to be huge if needed.
Yeah, I think you got some depth there. It'll be interesting to see if Amari Adams can avoid a red shirt. Heard a lot of good things about Champ Thompson as a freshman last year. Where's Heaven Brown Schuler after he redshirted? Matter of fact, he might have been there 2 years now. But where's he at now? So, I mean, you got some talent there. You got some experience. You got some depth. But those would be my top 4 guys. Capehart, Woods, Stephylon Green, and Vic Burley.
The fact that Capehart was able to come back for this year, I think, is one of the most underrated wins of the offseason. Truly. People don't realize how impactful that guy is when he is at his best. That is a pro.
Yeah, and a lot of times it takes 2 guys to block him.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's disruptive, that's for sure. Do you think there will be some creative use of linebackers by Allen, like bringing Anderson and giving Woodaz a different role in a scheme or 2? I do. Matter of fact, I heard Ben Boulware say the other day, we're going to get creative with Jeremiah Alexander. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say, yeah, you're going to see a little bit of creativity to try to, generate some heat. How they go about doing that, I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure you meant to say Alexander instead of Anderson there. I'm assuming anyways. I doubt you're meaning Jamal Anderson. So I'm going to go out on a limb and assume you mean Jeremiah Alexander. But yeah, Ben Boulware specifically said that last week. He's got it. He can line up on the edge. He spent pretty much all the spring playing Mike. But Boulware said they do not want to pigeonhole him into one position. They want him to play Mike, Will. They think he can stand up on the end and rush the passer. So I think I think a lot of that's going to depend on him. How ready he is. You would assume, since he's been at this level for 3 years now, that he's ready to roll. I don't think Tom Allen runs this complex defensive scheme that people have problems, learning and soaking up. So yeah. And then when you look at the roster, once you get behind Woodaz and Sammy Brown, there's not a lot of experience depth there. You got Kobe McLeod coming back from the injury, but even he hasn't played a ton. You got D Creighton who's logged some snaps, but he's probably the most experienced. And outside of that, you got a freshman in Logan Anderson, who's coming off a torn ACL, and CJ Kuba Taylor, who redshirt. I think he's going to be a redshirt sophomore this year, maybe, but still an underclassman. I mean, so I do think it's fair to have some questions about the depth behind Woodaz and Alexander, but I do think they'll try to get creative in ways they use Alexander, trying to get him on the field.
Absolutely. And he's just such an athlete, like that was one of his main draws as a recruit. And it's kind of like the wide receiver thing. Like you're going to find ways for him to impact the game. And I think it's probably good for those younger guys to have him in the room as somebody that has played a lot of football somewhere else, been around, different coaching. I think probably that leadership and having somebody that has had to work for it and has now come to Clemson and is also new there will probably be helpful. And, I think Wade Woodaz I think he's due for a really big season on top of that too. He's had really great moments, and I would not be shocked if he came out and people were like, oh my gosh, this year with Coach Allen's defense, with Alexander, with Sammy Brown. I think they're going to be a problem. I am worried about the depth there.
I think Sammy manning the mic and Wade Woodaz moving to wheel is going to be big for him, and it's going to allow him to probably be a little more productive. But yeah, it's fair to question the depth there, absolutely. Because even with Alexander, that's a guy he's a former 5-star, but he didn't. That was a loaded linebacker room in Alabama. He just didn't get on the field much there. Another thing Boulware said was he called him the hardest working guy he's seen. So, I mean, that's the kind of things you want to hear.
Absolutely.
The players on that side of the ball, particularly coming off a season in which they had so many struggles last year.
And, credit to Dabo and everybody here. The two guys that I've heard coaches say are the most hardest working guys they've ever seen are Alexander and Tristan Smith. So, you went out and you got the kind of person you're looking for. And after a summer and spring, your coaches are saying that about you. It's a good look.
Depth at defensive end is the only question I have on defense. That makes two of us there, brother. You go out and bring in the transfer to kind of address what was the biggest weak spot on that defense last year, the spot opposite of TJ Parker. But if something happens and that guy goes down, suddenly you're right back in the same spot you were a season ago. Just listening to Chris Rumpf talk the other day, I'm not convinced Darian Mayo's in a spot to where he's really ready to step up and contribute. So I don't know that he would be an option if Helt were to go down. So I think you're back to depending on
Denhoff and the gang.
And Denhoff and God forbid Armand Mason. Golly, I hate to say it like that, but we're talking about a former walk-on. But that's kind of where you are at this point. You got to cross your fingers and hope that guy stays healthy.
Yeah, completely agree.
Because Ari Watford's likely headed towards a red shirt. The freshman tore ACL late last year. Wouldn't expect anything from him. Doubt the lights ever coming on for Zaire Patterson. That guy's been there 5-6 years now, and
had another surgery in May.
Yeah, I was about to say he stays hurt all the time. And that's kind of your options. That's it. That is it. So yeah, to me that's the big one on defense. Hopefully they practice kick protection a little more. Yeah, I didn't get to talk to any of the special teams coaches the other day. because they, all those were done kind of one-on-one, and a lot of them at the same time as some other coaches. I think Will talked to one of them. I can't remember for
I
sure.
think he did too. I don't know who.
So I don't know if they were asked about that stuff or not, but I mean, good Lord, how many field goals did they have blocked last year? I think 6, maybe.
It was some sort of record.
Yeah, it was insane.
And the funniest part was that didn't Nolan not miss any kicks that weren't blocked? Like,
I think there might have been one that might have got blocked that was low, that might have gotten blocked regardless. But all the rest of those, man, if I remember right, those things were probably going, they should have got that was all on the protection. And I get it. The injuries kind of factored into that there a little bit. But, I mean, to me, that's something that shouldn't be all that difficult to get fixed. Happens once, okay, fine. We had a breakdown. Happens twice, yeah, we might need to address that. Happens 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, something's wrong.
There's something in the foundation here. Something went awry at some point. I don't know if it was in the summer. I don't know. But listen, it just made it all that much more glorious, the ACC championship game, when they did their job. They did it so well. And
how many people, when they ran Hoosier out there, thought that kick was going to get blocked? I think I called it in the press box that thing's getting blocked.
No chance. I was like, he may make it, but
especially from 56 yards out, you got to kick it on a little bit lower trajectory.
What do you think you do to get better at that? Do you just rep it more every day? Is there an issue with the personnel? Like, what do you think it was?
I'd have to go back and look at who all was on that, because it was weird because it was all on the same side pretty much.
Yep.
All on the left side. And it seemed like each time it was a different guy that where the breakdown was occurring. I think you gotta find who you want to run out there in those situations, and you gotta rep it. Just like you would anything on offense. How many times have you heard Garrett Riley talking about repping so much that it just becomes muscle memory? I think that would kind of be the same thing, but you can't have a turnstile out there either. You got to find the guys that can do it and run them out there. And again, I know injuries played a part in that. I just don't think there's any excuse for having 6 field goals blocked.
Especially when you have such a good kicker.
Exactly. He's such a weapon. Coaches always mention people that never pan out, particularly in the spring. You have your spring football heroes that you never hear from again, or some guy that goes off in a spring game and you never see him again. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure other coaches do that. Dabo's really good at,
spreading the love.
Yeah, spreading the love to some guys during the spring. You just gotta. Once you listen to him long enough, you start to figure out how to decipher. You got to learn that it's not about what he says. It's kind of how he says it's the words he's using to describe a guy. Once you kind of can start to read between the lines and you've listened to it enough, you can start to kind of decipher who's where the spring sunshine's coming from and who's legit. But yeah, I mean, there's always some spring heroes. We see it every year. A man says he is not worried about the Friday night Louisville game because of the way they got smacked last year. Yeah, I mean, that's a valid point. You know, there's going to be the revenge factor there.
You can make that point, though, about every team that Clemson beat last year that we play on the road. I mean, part of life. But I think the revenge factor is something. But I still think that doesn't totally override going up there on a Friday.
Me neither. You know, I do think that look, I mean, I think this team's going to be better across the board, much better on defense. I think they're going to be better on offense everywhere. I mean, but again, it's just, at least to me, man, it's just so hard to run the table. And if I had to pick one game out of this schedule, to me, that's the one.
Are you talking about ACC schedule or just everybody?
Everybody. You know, I would ride with LSU or Georgia Tech second after that, but I think Clemson's going to beat LSU. So I would ride with probably Georgia Tech number 2 after that. Again, it's just Clemson's had some funky things happen to them on Friday nights in the past. Somebody else says, I agree, Donald. Friday night should be for high school only. But
it's wrong.
Yeah, it kind of is what it is.
But I will say, then you get to watch football on Saturday, and Clemson pulls off the win. It's the most relaxed you're going to be watching game day of the whole season, other than a bye week.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a revenge factor there. I just think that Louisville team's going to be pretty good.
I think so too.
You know, I haven't completely decided how I'm going to vote for the ACC preseason poll yet, but they're going to be way up high. Not over Clemson, but right behind them. Do I think the days of landing a top 2 or 3 QB are in the past? I do, because of NIL, because I'm confident the CSC won't have anywhere close to the impact people think. You know, I don't know. It just depends on the guy, the class. Each guy's different. But landing those top 5 quarterbacks are definitely harder. That's why, you know, I think it's imperative that you find a guy that fits what you want to do on offense. And I think Garrett Riley's done a pretty good job of that. Outside of the first one he took, I never kind of saw that fit with Blake Hebert, but, you know, I'm not the quarterback coach, offensive coordinator. He does seem to have a type. Hebert doesn't fit the type of the rest of these guys he's taken. You know, Tate Reynolds and the Hughley kid and Brock Bradley. But yeah, landing a top 5 QB is definitely going to cost you more money. You know, whether it be NIL, rev share, whatever, it's going to cost you more money. At the same time, I don't think you have to have a 5-star quarterback to win a national championship. I mean, we've seen too many instances of non-5 stars winning. Heck, Deshaun Watson wasn't a 5-star. Maybe at least by most of the services. I can't remember if he was at one or maybe, I don't remember, but most didn't rate him a 5-star. But you kind of have to decide whether you want to spend a bunch of money on one player or, you know, maybe find a guy that's not going to cost you as much, and then you have more to kind of divvy out everywhere else, if that makes sense. And I think that's kind of what Clemson's done the past 2 or 3 years.
I still think that winning plays a role in getting those guys. I really do. you know?
And the offense and the receivers.
Yeah, like all of the above is still your coordinators not having a ton of turnaround there. I don't know. I still think that plays a role in it, at least with the type of guys that Clemson usually goes after.
Oh, it definitely does. No quarterback, especially these big time quarterbacks, it'll be a rare occasion that you see them go to some scrub school that's not finishing 500 and doesn't at least give you a chance to win. Going back and looking at Deshaun Watson, 24/7 ranked number 81 overall. He was ranked number 2 among the dual threat quarterbacks, but he was ranked number 81. I think Trevor Lawrence has kind of been the exception to that rule as far as rankings go and 5 stars and stuff. But a guy like Hughley, I think Rivals they rank him inside the top 200 somewhere overall. It's not the top 100. It's not the top 50, but it's the top 200. And that's kind of the sweet spot right now.
I agree. I mean, the last time a 5-star high school quarterback won the national championship was Trevor.
I thought that was the case.
Yeah, which tells you something. I mean, 2024, you have J.J. McCarthy in Michigan, and that's your highest besides him since that point. So it's a two-way street,
Yep. I just and I'm not saying you, John, are saying you have to have a 5-star to win it all, but because I'm pretty sure you don't think that way, but Clemson targeting those upper echelon guys, those days are probably over, at least for right now. Riley, Grish, Richardson have so much talent to do whatever they want this year. High octane offense should be back. We've kind of talked about the receivers, quarterback a little bit. You mentioned Kyle Richardson here, so we can dive into the tight ends. I've seen several people over here asking about Ian Shefflin. And I think Kyle Richardson. I think Kyle Richardson was kind of shocked the other day that was not the first question he got.
Oh, they had a bet on it.
Yeah, really? I remember you telling me that. I remember I went over there in the middle of the thing and asked him about it, and he said, "Oh, you're only the third person." So yeah, that's kind of a hot topic, but
fair.
Yes, very fair. I kind of see him. I asked one of those. As a matter of fact, I asked a couple of those guys what were realistic expectations for Shefflin, and I didn't really get a good concrete answer because I don't think they know. I talked to the assistant tight ends coach there, Shipman, for a few minutes, and he was pretty transparent about them not really knowing what they have in him yet, and how much he gets on the field. A lot of that's gonna be up to him. How fast he can soak it all in, how fast he picks it up. He's not really played football since the 9th grade, something like that. And we're talking about a kid that's already been in college for 4 years. So it's been a hot minute since he's put on the pads. I think
Barack Obama was still president last time Ian Shefflin played football.
I think you're right. I have seen people that, have these outlandish expectations for him, and I just think people need to temper them a little bit. Let's don't put golly, what's the word I'm trying to. Let's don't put unrealistic expectations on that guy, particularly when you're talking about a position where you already have Olsen, Pat Henry, who's kind of coming into his 3rd year and rounding into form. Christian Battencure.
I think he should get so much playing time.
I think he's going to be hard to keep off the field.
I think so too. He's got size. He has crazy athleticism. Dude was like in the top 3 in all-time receiving yards, touchdowns, receptions in, I think he's from Indiana, like in history. Like he's a freak athlete. And listen, as excited as I was when I heard that Ian Shefflin was coming to play football for a season, one of my first thoughts was, man, I would be a little bit upset if he took snaps away from somebody like that I think is actually going to be very influential.
And like Shefflin, Betancourt is also a pretty strong guy, pretty strong basketball player. You know,
Yep.
he averaged more than 20 points a game as a junior, shot about 60% from the field. He was an all-state honorable mention. So that kind of lends some credence to your athleticism point you were making a minute ago. Yeah, that he's got some skills. I think he's going to be hard to keep off the field. You know, going back to Chef, maybe, you know, that they design a couple of packages to try to get him out and create some mismatches down in the red zone or something. But I just don't expect to see a ton of him. You know, it's
I don't either. But I wouldn't want to guard him.
No, I surely wouldn't. You know, there's if you're going to play every down and be on the field a bunch, there's a lot that goes in the playing tight end, you know, with the protections and the blocking and stuff. But if you're going to just create a handful of packages for him and put him out there sparingly in certain situations, I could definitely see that happening. Heard Wesco is put on 20 pounds. I don't know if it's 20 pounds. We'll see. Come to weigh in. Is it? Yeah, they kind of overplay that stuff sometimes. He definitely looks like he's added some bulk. You know, golly, what was he last year? About 185?
If that.
Let's see what they had him listed at last year. Because I saw him about 5 weeks ago. And you can tell he's been in the waiting room some.
Yeah, they had him at 185.
185. So if he's 20 pounds heavier, that put him at 205. If that's true, hopefully it didn't mess with his speed. So we shall see. He doesn't look, you know, you can easily put on 20 pounds and it not look like it. He does not look like a guy that's 20 pounds heavier than me. He looks like he's in the 195 range to me, but I'm also blind as a bat.
One of the things they said, Coach Gresham, when he was talking, he said, you know, I think he's put on about 20 pounds of weight. I'll need to go double check their catapult thing, whatever. But he said, I'm not a stickler in any way for how much somebody weighs. It's all about speed and athleticism. And if you're gaining weight while you're getting faster, great. If not, then we have a problem. So he said everything is pointed to he looks faster, stronger, and with that, he's gotten bigger. But I don't think the priority for any of them was necessarily for him just to bulk up.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing with him was he needed to get stronger.
Yeah, for sure.
Not necessarily add a bunch of weight. If he did, great, particularly if it doesn't affect his speed. You know, because you want to see a guy like him have the strength to kind of fight off some of that press coverage at the line. Something he kind of struggled with at times last year, but you also expect a guy like that to kind of have that physical progression. You know, it's easy to forget he was just a freshman last year.
He's 18-year-old
kid. I mean, you know, So this is kind of the natural order of things. He should be getting bigger and stronger, but man, he does not look like a dude that's added 20 pounds. If he has, great. That'd be awesome. I'd be thrilled if he was at 195. But either way, no matter what he weighs, he definitely looks like a guy that's added some strength since last year. So he was just that wiry freshman, and that will allow him to kind of add to his arsenal, so to speak. Dabo had trust in Denoff, Lawson, except did he? I mean, he had so much trust in those guys that he moved Peter Woods outside the defensive end. So I don't know that them getting as much playing time last year was as much about trust in them as just being forced to.
Necessity.
Yeah, necessity, because Peter Woods is banged up. He's not as effective out there as you were hoping he'd be. He did not. I mean, heck, I remember Dabo saying they wanted him down to like 290, before the season. He never got close to that. He was never any. I think he said he ended up weighing over 330 pounds last year by the end of the season, if I'm remembering that right. So, I mean, he was probably never in the physical shape to play in. I don't think it's so much about Dabo having trust in those guys as they just didn't have anybody else to turn to. I mean, I've said it 100 times, man. I think it was a massive, massive mistake not to go to the portal for a defensive end before last season. And probably would never be admitted publicly behind closed doors. Dabo might say the same thing now. He might tell people that behind closed doors. I don't know if he'd ever say it publicly, but the fact that he went and got Will Helt kind of tells you exactly how much trust he's got in those guys. So the deal at punter kind of feels a little different to me. Doesn't mean it's going to turn out different, but it does kind of feel a little different anyways. Any word on how hard Cole Turner has been working in the offseason? Have heard all about all the work that all the other receivers have put it in. Haven't heard anything about Turner. Yeah, I mean, he's kind of, I keep calling Tyler Brown the forgotten man. That's kind of what Cole Turner really is. He's kind of, back in 2023, he's starting games. He might have started a game last year. I can't remember. I might have the years wrong. Let's say 2022, he's starting games. 2023, he's hurt.
He was hurt
last year. Tell you, my memory's terrible.
No,
anyways, that guy, he's starting games at some point. Now he's kind of, if I think if most people are ranking the receivers 1 through 6, you probably got him at number 6. They've just kind of recruited over him, went to the portal and grabbed a guy over him. I can't answer your question about how hard he's been working in the off season. I've never heard anything, but positive stuff about how much work he puts in, and it's pretty well documented. He's one of the fastest players on the team, but I just don't know that he brings to the table what some of these other guys do. I think there is a role for him in this offense, but as a complementary piece.
Agree. I think he will have opportunities. If you go and look back, like with the amount of clutch catches he's had, like he's made himself a name for being important. He's had bad moments too, but there have been some big Cole Turner moments. And when he's healthy, he's right up there with anybody. And I think we'll get opportunity. They did talk about him a little bit at the media day and said that I think he's ready to go, healthy, everything's good. And they talked a lot about him as a big time leader in that room, right up there with Antonio. And so at least you're getting that from him. You're getting that kind of praise. I don't know how that translates to, his playing time, but they definitely spoke about him and it wasn't a forgotten kind of a thing.
Once Jay Haynes is ready, do you think they'll put him back on kick return some or most of the time? I don't know who's going to return kicks yet, to be honest. There were a bunch of different dudes that were doing it during the spring. It looked like they were trying a bunch of different options. I think a lot of that, whether Haynes can return kicks, I think a lot of that depends on how quickly he regains trust in that knee. Sometimes it takes guys a while to get back to trusting that knee once they tear an ACL. So some of that's going to depend on him. He is not going to be fully ready by the time fall camp starts. So Dabo said he was progressing, but he would be one of the guys that weren't full go once fall camp starts. Him and Watford were the two guys he mentioned by name. So I think that if I had to make an educated guess right now, I'm going to say Jay Haynes is probably not returning kickoffs this year.
When did he get hurt?
ACC Championship, 1st of December.
That's right.
I don't know who it's going to be yet. But I just don't know that I don't know that I'm confident in a guy coming off ACL getting back returning kick. But heck, Phil Maffa was doing it before he got hurt. We've seen Adam Randall. Maybe Randall's the kick returner.
That was my guess.
That would be my guess right now. But that's probably one of the few position battles that have yet to be settled. But a big part of that's going to depend on where Haynes is. Who else you think we will see at kick returner?
Adam Randall made a pretty strong case for himself. ACC championship game. That's some of the best kick returning I've seen in a minute, But
I'm not a big fan of having your starting running back as your kick returner, although Dabo's never shied away from doing it. He's done it plenty of times with Shipley, with Maffa, CJ Spiller. You can go back a long ways. Dabo's done it.
You don't want to run those guys into the ground, but also I think that this running back room is not just going to be one guy like it was last year. You're not going to have a Phil Maffa playing when he can't move his arm. I think they're going to have a lot more rotation. And so that makes me feel better about one of them doing it, whether that be an Adam or somebody else. But I don't know. I could see one of those younger running backs doing it as well, getting the opportunity.
I wonder if they've, I want to say they were working Jarvis Green out at kick return.
Yeah, I could see that
during the spring. Again, can't trust my memory anymore these days, but that's a pretty good question about who's going to be returning kicks. All right, Ashby, which freshman will have the biggest impact?
Running back.
Ditto. I'm going Gideon Davidson. I fully expect Adam Randall to be starting running back game 1, week 1. But I think Gideon's going to see the field a lot, and I'm not convinced Randall is going to hold him off all year long. I did find Dabo's comments about Randall the other day very interesting. I think he's going to be the best, one of the great college football stories of the season. We just saw something similar play out at SMU last year. They took a wide receiver from Miami out of the portal, turned him into a running back, and I think he I know he led the team, but I think he turned in one of the best seasons ever for SMU on the ground from an all-purpose standpoint. So it sounds like they're thinking they, not that Randall's going to duplicate those kind of numbers because the guy had close to 2,000 all-purpose yards, but something similar. If everything goes the way Clemson wants it to go, I'm not sure Clemson has a 1,000-yard rusher this year. You'd like to be able to divide that workload up between 2 or 3 of those guys, but I'm still rolling with Gideon Davidson. I've heard too many good things about him in the spring and how fast he was soaking things up. I think that guy's going to have a massive impact this year. What about Caden's story? Well, I would just say there is a reason that I did not mention his name earlier. I'm sure Ashby didn't mention it for similar reasons. He's a guy that's been moved around a little bit. Starts at defensive tackle. They talk about moving him to end. Heck, they say they move him to end. We go out to practice. He's still lining up at tackle. You're talking about a highly rated guy coming out of high school, and he's going in. I think he's a redshirt junior, and he's just not had any kind of impact. Come to find out, he was nowhere near close to being ready to play once he got to Clemson, and he was kind of one of those guys that was going to need, a couple years. And here we are. It's been more than a couple years. And
he's a redshirt junior.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Sometimes it just don't work out. We're talking about a guy that was ranked inside the top 150. He's been on campus this will be his 4th year. And he's just not been able to, create any opportunities for himself. Maybe you got more insight on that than I do.
I think he's been hurt some too.
He has. He's been hurt a little bit.
Yeah. I think I've seen him walking around in a boot on multiple occasions, which, don't know if that says anything crazy, but always part of it when somebody like that, so highly recruited out of high school, just doesn't see the field for years.
Looks like we dodged the bullet with Marquise Henderson. Yeah. There's a reason why nobody else has picked him up. I'm not gonna rehash any of that stuff. I'm sure most of y'all saw the story that I don't remember if it was the State or the Post and Courier ran about what happened, the final straw with him. I'll just say that based on some things I heard, it was definitely just the final straw. There had been some other issues, and sounds like Liberty, either they never offered him, I think they did though, and yanked it, is kind of what I've been led to believe. So he's not going to go there. Right now, it looks like he's not going to have an opportunity anywhere to play this year. And that's just a sad story, man, because that kid is talented, but there's a lot of baggage. Big thing I want to see is how much we got to wrap this thing up, man. If we've been doing it, we run way over. All right. Scratch off and then just says he wants to see the run defense improve. I think we all want to see that.
Yeah. Raise your hand if you want to see the run defense improve.
Raise your hand if you think it's going to be much improved. That's a big part of why Tom Allen was brought in here. I just think it just got to a point to where a lot of the stuff Wes wanted to do was just so complex, and it guys were thinking instead of reacting. It wasn't kind of second nature, thinking too much. When you overthink, you're a step slow. And when you're a step slow, the guy's already by you.
And, I think Wes was so beneficial for so many years. And I think as defensive coordinator, I don't know that he was able to do necessarily the stuff he was best at, in the box and doing all that kind of stuff. And so to have somebody that is just tried and true, knows how to get results, is going to make you do up downs for every loaf you have. Like, that's what you need when you've struggled that much with something like, wrapping up.
Yep. Accountability. All right. Amari Adams is a defensive tackle. 6'5", over 300 pounds already. Definitely defensive tackle. He played end at South Florence in a 3-4 scheme, but he is definitely a tackle at the college level. All right, make sure I don't skip over here anything. We're not going to get to everybody, and for that, I apologize. Ashby and myself got to get up early in the morning.
Tippy, I think you have less of a drive.
Yeah, it's not that bad for me. Where are we going? To the Weston?
Hilton.
Is that the name of it? It's not the Weston anymore?
I think it's the Hilton. Yeah.
All right. Hilton it is. It used to be at the Weston.
I'm glad we asked.
The Hilton Charlotte Uptown?
Yeah.
Let's see how far it is. 2:13.
Easy.
2 hours, 13 minutes. All back roads. All right, here you go. Are we all just afraid to say that Clemson is loaded, or are we just in the boat as just a wait and see game? Look, man, with all the returning production Clemson's got coming back, I think it's fair to say they're loaded. You got a senior quarterback who many have termed to be a Heisman hopeful. Probably won't win it, but when it gives you an idea of what people think or the kind of year people think he's going to have. He's going into his third year under the same offensive coordinator, the same offense. And he's also a guy that, as good as he was last year, as much improvement as he made last year, a lot of that coming into ball security. I think he had like 10 fumbles as a sophomore, lost 5 of them. Not one fumble last year that he was charged with, only 6 picks. There's still another step he can take. I think the offense has got to be more consistent. They got to try to avoid some of those long droughts they would go in where they'd have a bunch of 3-and-outs in a row or 3-and-outs on 3 out of 4 drives. We saw that too often last year. And I think they will be improved there, man. But the biggest thing for me is the shakeup on the staff on defense. To me, there was never a question of talent on defense last year. You just didn't have everybody pulling in the same direction. When everybody's not pulling in the same direction, you end up having a freaking train wreck, and that's what we saw last year. So, yeah, I'm not afraid to say Clemson's loaded. If they don't make it back to the playoff, man, this season's a massive disappointment.
Yeah, I think not even make it back to the playoff. I think win a playoff game is, I think, the anything less than winning at least one playoff game would be not living up to the talent on this team. But then again, Dabo said it in his press conference, getting a lot of hype. This is the same team that Texas ran crazy on, same guys. And it'll be interesting to see them shut that narrative down.
Agreed. That's why, I've talked about this before on here. I think that LSU game, it's a big one, but not because you need to win it to get in the playoff. You can lose that game and still easily make the playoff. I think it's more important for LSU in that regard. But I do think you need to win it to kind of change the narrative a little bit. I know there's a lot of hype for Clemson right now, but if you drop that game, that's 4 in a row you've lost to SEC teams going back to the opener last year. Georgia, South Carolina, Texas, and then that would be LSU would be number 4. That's a narrative you don't even want to start back up, because it's one, you would not have an opportunity to kind of change until probably the playoff, because beating South Carolina, I don't think we haven't even touched on them being voted 5th in the SEC. I don't think that's the 5th best team in the SEC. I mean, they got some first place votes. I mean, several. Hell, somebody gave Vanderbilt 2 first place votes. 2 of them. I don't know
what year are we living in?
I don't know what they were serving in the food or the water there at the SEC Media Days, but geez Louise. South Carolina had 30-something seniors on that team last year, a lot of them on the defensive side of the ball. That's a lot of production to replace, and I'm not convinced they did it.
You're basing that based off of one player. You're putting them in a ranking.
I don't think they're going to be as good defensively. I think Lenoris will be better. How much depends on some of the guys around him and what they've got at receiver and how good that offensive line is. But, I just don't think they're going to be good enough to where if you beat them, that changes that narrative that you can go out and beat a good SEC team. You won't get another opportunity into the playoff. You need to go out and nip that in the bud. Week 1, game 1, beat LSU, and there's no talk about any of that crap.
Well, that's one narrative. The second narrative is you haven't won your opener since 2022? And
3 in a row.
You haven't had a home opener or an opener at home since 2019. This is your time to do it. This is your time to do it. Got to win that game.
Yep. That is
because you're going to get you're going to get so many narratives that you don't want in your head regardless. Just shut it down.
Yep, because you go back, you lost to Duke in 22, or who was that, 23?
That's 23. Georgia 24.
Who'd you lose to in 22 in the opener?
This
would be the third. This would be the third.
This would be the third.
Duke, Georgia, LSU would be the third. There's another brain fart.
Who'd you beat? It was in the – they played Georgia Tech?
Yes, in Atlanta.
Yep.
A very ugly win that day. They didn't play their best on offense till Cade came in that last.
Looks like Tom Brady for a drive.
Yeah, and everybody.
The Will Taylor. Yeah. Crazy.
Oh, yeah, but that's another good point. You want to, and winning the opener is one of your goals, right? That is your first goal every year.
That is the goal right now.
Opener. Yep. So, that is a very, very valid point. All right, we got to jump out of here, man. 90 minutes has flown by. Want to thank Ashby for joining us tonight. Want to thank our sponsors over at A-Glass. Check them out. 2 locations in the PD, 1 in Florence, 1 in Sumter. As it says right there, scrolling across the bottom, get yourself a free quote today. myaglass.com. ACC Media Days tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday. Lots of content coming from that stuff. Check it out, ClemsonInsider.com. Myself, Ashby, Will, Everybody else going to have you covered. Appreciate you coming by, Ashby.
Thank you so much for having me, JP. This was so much fun.
My pleasure. And we'll see you right back here next Monday, 7 p.m.